Welcome to That's Pretty Neat with Rodger and Stefan, where we discuss neat, holistic, regenerative agriculture.
So, Rodger, we're here with our cows, doing a little brush crushing and invigorating, bringing some brush back, bringing some grass, creating some biodiversity. What I want to know, and what I'm thinking about right now, is what's happening in the soil.
Good points, Stefan. People forget that there's way more life below ground than above ground. And if we're to manage holistically and manage well, we really need to be thinking about what we can't see. So if the camera pans around and we look at all these cattle above ground, it looks like a lot. And yet this is a tiny fraction of what's below the soil. And so those microorganisms that live below the soil, the ones that live in the top millimeter of soil only live in the top millimeter of soil. The ones in the second millimeter only live there, et cetera, and as we go all the way down through the soil profile. Now, if life is to beget life...
I think they have something to say too.
You agree with me, do you? Okay. If we work on the principle that life begets life and more life begets more life, then what can we do to encourage the life in the top millimeter of soil? Well, what we need to do is we need to protect it from the harmful effects of ultraviolet radiation. So ultraviolet radiation is it's used for sterilization. We use it to sterilize bottled water and stuff like that because it sterilizes very well. Well, the same thing it does to the soil surface. So that's why we need a cover of lignin, which is what the grasses are providing. So the 5% grass that doesn't get eaten by the cows, if it just gets trampled flat on the ground and becomes the lignin cover, then it's protecting the microorganisms on the top from ultraviolet light. But then what goes through the cow and that comes out as a cow patty is also protecting those microorganisms from ultraviolet light. So once the top millimeter of microorganisms have been protected and are able to reproduce, multiply, et cetera, well, then that leads to the second millimeter, et cetera.
Wow. Okay.
Now, where it gets even more complex is after those microorganisms have got established and they're protected, well, then we also have the fungal mycelial networks. Now, we all know that mushrooms grow where it's warm, wet, and dark. Well, that hot surface is not warm, wet, and dark. There's sunlight on it.
Yeah.
So it's only when that's protected with organic matter that it can become warm, wet, and dark. And the mycelial networks, or the fungi in the soil, are almost more important than everything that's happening above ground.
Why is that?
They trigger the seeds when to germinate. They hold moisture. They hold carbon. There's funguses that are pumping water from 100 feet underground back up to the soil surface to feed. They trade water with sugar for sugar from the plants. So, if a pasture stays green well into the dry season, it's often because it's got a healthy mycelial network underground. So when the water is receded further than the plant's roots, then the funguses will pump the water back up in exchange for sugar. There's so much complexity that we've barely begun to understand. So yeah, and the cows are a vital part of keeping that whole ecosystem going, but they're just what we see above ground. There's much more interesting stuff happening below the ground.
So how do the cows influence that, what sounds to be one of the most important parts in the cycle, that fungal network?
Well, a lot of people didn't understand it, and they got cow dung out of dairies and stuff, and they've spread it on crop fields, and it didn't really have that much of a positive impact. What we have learned is that the urine from the cow is almost more important than the dung from the cow. So the dung is an ultraviolet light protector, but the urine is feeding the soil microorganisms and the fungi. And we found a correlation between 11 foot from any grass plant and a radius of 11 foot, so call it 3 meters, around every grass plant. The fungal networks will bring nutrients from the urine back to that individual grass plant. And that's another reason for having your animals dense. If you've got urine here and on top of that hill and over there, it doesn't really do an overall benefit to a pasture. But if cows are urinating everywhere, then generally there'll be a 3-meter radius circle of any plant. And that's when you see your whole pasture go dark green, as opposed to a pasture that's got patches of dark green and patches of yellow. Patches of yellow are showing that your mycelial network is not able to feed your entire pasture's plants. So all connected, and that's what we can observe above ground to let us know what's happening below ground. Exciting stuff.
That's pretty exciting.
You can follow Rodger at d2gftf.com and also on his socials at Rodger Savory Holistic Management on YouTube and Facebook. We are Las Cumbres Ranch. You can follow us on social media at Las Cumbres Ranch over all platforms. And thanks for tuning in. It's been real neat.